Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, the first webinar for HACCEN. We're so glad that you're here with us. Before we get to the conversation involving our panelists today, I have a few administrative items to go over with you. First off, greetings. My name is Amy Herrera. I'm a special agent at the Washington, D.C. field office for the FBI, and also here in my role as a co-coordinator for the National Capital Region chapter of InfraGard. So the administrative portions of today. Number one, we are recording our conversation today. The recording of this webinar will be hosted on the HACCEN portal. More to come about that. Item number two, we welcome your questions. We intend for this to be an interactive sort of session with us and our panel of experts here to answer the questions that are on your mind. So please do not be shy. Put your questions in the question box anytime, and we'll weave them in as we go through the conversation today. So please feel free to submit lots of questions. We are not issuing continuing education credits today, but you will get an email tomorrow that confirms your attendance at the session today, and it will have a certificate also saying that you were an attendee here. So you can use that and submit it to whatever organization you typically get your CEUs through. That's up to you. If there are any folks today here from the media and you're looking to do a story on today's event, please reach out directly to us through the question box or the chat box, and we'll connect you with the appropriate public affairs folks who can help you with that task. We have included two handouts for your use today. One of them is under the handout section, which I think you can find by going up to File drop down. That handout is specific to the threat of terrorism and hate crimes against Jewish institutions. The other resource we've preloaded for you is in the chat box, and that is a tool from the Department of Homeland Security that allows for houses of worship to do a self-assessment of their security. So feel free to grab those, share them, download them, no caveats on how far you can share them. Feel free to use them as you'd like. That is the conclusion of our admin. So at this time, I am most pleased to turn the virtual microphone over to my friend Maya Saab, who's Executive Director of the Faith-Based Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. Maya, over to you.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for that warm introduction. As Amy mentioned, I am Maya Saab, the Executive Director of the Faith-Based Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. Faith-Based ISAO, as we like to call it. So Faith-Based ISAO provides members with information, analysis, and capabilities to help reduce risk while enhancing preparedness, security, and resilience. Faith-Based ISAO is an all-faith, all-hazards information sharing organization. And in my role, I'm responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations of the organization. And as part of my job, I do many things. But the thing that I enjoy the most and that I always look forward to is engaging with people. So thank you for listening to me as I intro this session to you. Really important topics such as which religious traditions are most often targeted in hate crimes? What are those religious communities doing to combat hate crimes? And what can we do together to mitigate hate crimes and hate incidents? By their very nature, faith-based organizations believe in something, and that automatically makes them targets for violence, which includes hate incidents. So let's get started on the conversation so we can learn from one another and hopefully find ways to mitigate the occurrence of hate incidents.
So first, from the Jewish tradition is Ms. Vicki Fishman. She is the Northern Virginia and DC Director of Government and Community Relations for the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. She's an attorney and a longtime local Jewish community leader, including leadership stints at a Jewish day school, at a Jewish endowment fund, at a Jewish federation, and at a Jewish advocacy group. Secondly, from the Muslim tradition is Mr. Rizwan Jaka, who is the chair of the Interfaith Government Media Committee at the All Dulles Area Muslim Society, also known as ADAMS. Rizwan has served in various leadership roles at ADAMS for a quarter century. He hosts or coordinates more than 100 interfaith activities and programs every year. He also serves on advisory groups for local, state, and federal partners. Our third panelist today is Ms. Sharon Kaur Singh, who's a program director with the Sikh American Legal Defense and Education Fund, also called SALDEF. Sharon does advocacy work, including conducting cultural awareness training to government officials, law enforcement, including FBI, and TSA officers as part of SALDEF's National Speakers Bureau. She oversees a national Sikh youth legislative internship and leadership program, which is called Sikh lead that encourages civic engagement among the youth. Sharon's also on a number of advisory councils for federal and state agencies. So first, we're going to give a small chunk of time to each of those three panelists to answer two main questions. What are you seeing in your community when it comes to hate crimes, and what have you tried to mitigate hate crimes among your community? And after each of the three panelists answers those two questions, then we're going to go to a more round robin to throw lots of different questions at them. So first up, Vicki, if you could join us and speak to what are you seeing in the Jewish community, and what techniques is your community using to try and mitigate hate crimes?
Great, thank you, Amy. Thank you, Maya and Lindsay and the whole team at HACCEN. It is an honor to be part of this group. I will start, I guess, just with the point that you made, Amy, about the percentage of hate crimes targeting the religious communities and which are the three highest. In the Jewish community, we are acutely aware that while we make up about 2% of the American population, the FBI has repeatedly reported that we make up more than half of we are the target of more than half of the religiously based hate crimes. And so in our community planning, it is a big part of our picture. I will say that in the last week, and it has been an unusual week, but I have been in touch with law enforcement in DC and in Virginia about online chatter that was threatening the Jewish community, about a bomb threat at a local institution, and about graffiti. So while it's not typical that I would get all three of those conversations in 1 week, that does sort of give the picture of the realm, the spectrum of types of incidents that we see and are concerned about. We also are very aware of bullying incidents in schools, and coming from students, sometimes from teachers, and the JCRC is very involved working with the schools to address those kinds of issues. I think everyone is probably aware of the incident in Texas. While that was a couple of weeks ago, while that was in Texas and not locally, it has an impact both on just the psyche of the community, also the concern for copycat kinds of issues. And a couple of other things about those incidents. The graffiti incident that I was talking about was at Union Station. My understanding is that happened over the weekend. The swastikas were drawn throughout Union Station on the pillars around the building. They're still there because apparently there's an issue with removing them. So that's sort of, while it's just graffiti, it does continue to impact people as they move through the city. In terms of our approach to addressing it and trying to mitigate hate incidents, make them less common, as a community, historically, we have organized to protect ourselves, to work with the FBI, to work with our local law enforcement. We also are happy to be part of organizations and networks such as HACCEN, to work with neighbors within our communities, to share information, to share resources, to combat hate by developing interfaith relationships. So it's both on the infrastructure level that we combat it, as well as on the relationship level. We are very tuned in to government opportunities for hardening our infrastructure. There is a federal grant program that assists with this. We lobby for that program to exist, and we have a community infrastructure that helps synagogues and schools apply for those resources. Maryland, Montgomery County, and now Virginia, as of last year, also have programs where funding can be made available to help nonprofits, faith communities create infrastructure. One other point that I wanted to point out in terms of the hate crimes and hate incidents targeting our community is this is a faith-based conversation. What is I'm not sure that it's unique. I don't want to say definitively that it's unique, but it is certainly something that the Jewish community experiences. Is we are perceived as both a religious community, also an ethnic community. And in many ways, we see ourselves that way. And hate crimes, hate incidents against the Jewish community can be based on either one. Historically, if you look at anti-Semitism, and the Anti-Defamation League has some good literature that sort of spells this out. The reasons that incidents happen targeting the Jewish community can be based on religious differences, can be based on perceived racial differences, ethnic differences that make up the Jewish community. Well, I guess one last thing I think I forgot to mention, a couple of incidents over the past couple of years. There are communities around our region that anticipate at certain times of year sort of leaflet dropping. And that is a pretty common event where whether it's blaming the Jewish community along with others for spreading COVID, or whatever other sort of communal woe we're experiencing. There will be communities, neighborhoods where somebody has gone through and just dropped leaflets on people's doorsteps. Those are not necessarily targeting a specific person where the leaflet is dropped, but rather it's just spreading the literature that's blaming the Jews for everything. And often those leaflets are not just specifically targeting the Jewish community. It might be the Jewish community, the LGBTQ community, and others. And then we have, I think I mentioned earlier about schools. There was recently in DC in December, there was an incident at an elementary school in DC where a teacher had third graders reenact scenes from the Holocaust. And she had Jewish students enacting, pretending to be Hitler. She had Jewish students pretending to dig mass graves and then shoot their friends, pretend to shoot their friends who would fall in. Things like that are just, hard to imagine that anybody would do that. And we are working closely with the DC public schools to address it. But that's sort of the range of incidents that we have seen of late.
Thank you for that very quick but yet thorough overview. I really appreciate that. We're going to turn the virtual mic over to Rizwan so that he can speak to what our brothers and sisters in the Muslim tradition have experienced along the same lines. Rizwan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you, Maya and Lindsay. Salam, shalom, peace, shanti, peace in multiple faiths and languages. Thank you to the FBI, InfraGard, HACCEN, and Faith-Based Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. Appreciate all the colleagues on and all the folks that have joined today. We pray and stand in solidarity with the Jewish community against anti-Semitism, and after the horrific anti-Semitic hostage terror act in Texas, we stand in multi-faith solidarity. We saw the multi-faith community rush to the Catholic Church next to the synagogue to offer support to the synagogue and their families, as well as to the law enforcement. And that's how we must respond to hate and bigotry, with love and peace, and working together between multi-faith communities and law enforcement, in response to these horrific acts. As far as anti-Muslim hate crimes, it affects the Muslim community, and actually the anti-Muslim hate crimes and sentiment affects also the Sikh community, as well as Arab and South Asian Christian community, African American, Latinx, anyone that may be perceived as Muslim. Obviously, there's xenophobia and all the other categories as well by itself, but there is a spectrum that kind of spans across that. We all know about Khalid Jabara, an Arab Christian that was killed in a anti-Muslim hate crime, although he was an Arab Christian. And so there are obviously hate affects everyone, right? As we've seen, of all the multiple categories, and we must stand against it. In 2020, according to the FBI report, 110 anti-Muslim hate crimes, 89 anti-Sikh, 71 anti-Arab, and those kind of can be in that spectrum of anti-Muslim hate. But there are several thousand hate incidences a year against Muslim and against all communities, as mentioned, they may not get to that level of hate crime, as Lindsay had kind of explained in definition, that it may not be a specific threat, but it's intimidation, micro, medium aggressions, telling some Muslim woman going after her because she's wearing a scarf, trying to pull the scarf off, or just yelling at Muslims to go back to their country, or intimidation. And it's happened to my own wife and daughter who wear the headscarf, that they've been told to go back to their country, and they've been otherized or called pejorative names. And so those are challenges that Muslims face. And about 40% of Muslim students in schools, in the elementary, middle, or high school, are bullied, in some type of micro or medium aggression. Sometimes it elevates to a assault, and those cases are investigated. But even 40% of bullying is a very high situation that can cause trauma, and we want to work with schools to stop that. And obviously, there's all faith groups and racial groups are subject to bullying as well. In 2015 to 2018, about 160 mosques were attacked in the U.S. One, as we know, some were burnt down to a crisp, others were vandalized, and some were shot at, etc. We just came across the 5th anniversary in Canada, obviously in northern neighbor, on January 29th. A Canadian domestic terrorist murdered 6 Muslims and injured 8 Muslims in Quebec City Islamic Cultural Center. And also last year, in January 6th, 4 members of the Muslim community in Ontario were killed in an anti-Muslim hate crime as well. And so locally in Virginia, in spring of 2021, a man attempted to stab and kill Muslims at a Falls Church mosque. In spring of 2021 as well, a woman attacked 2 Muslim women and spit and slapped them in Sterling, Virginia, at a school real close to the Adams Center Mosque. And so those are just a couple of incidences just nearby. And so in Tacoma, Washington, a mosque was firebombed in October 2021. Another mosque was desecrated in December 2021 in Olympia, Washington. And Sikh Gurdwara and synagogues also were attacked in Washington state as well. And so it's something that, obviously these are all of concern, and we continue to see, mosques, synagogues, Sikh temples, and churches, African-American, Latinx, and so forth continue to be attacked. As far as how do we respond to bad with good. That's what we work on as a Muslim community and multi-faith community. We stand together in solidarity. When one faith or community is attacked, we all are attacked. So we stand together. We appreciate working with the FBI, Department of Justice, DHS, local law enforcement. We've done training for mosques in the region, assessments of the mosques and of houses of worship to make sure that we're looking at security systems. We have security guards. We do self-defense training as well, again, partnering together in the multi-faith, interfaith community to stand together against this hate and hate crimes. And then again, remind kids in schools to report bullying to the school administration, tell parents right away, because if you don't report the bullying, it can fester into an assault. And we've seen that exactly happen. And working again with great groups like HACCEN and Faith-Based Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. So thank you so much to everyone. Peace be with you.
Thank you, Rizwan, for that very quick and yet thorough overview of what's happening within your community. And now, Sharon, I'm going to toss the virtual mic over to you if you can speak to what we're seeing, what you're seeing among your community.
Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate it. And also thank you to everybody at HACCEN for organizing this webinar and for being part of this group to talk about this very important topic. I wanted to mention that what Lindsay mentioned as far as some of the hate crime data, the Sikh community actually saw a record number of documented incidences in 2020. It was a 37% increase over 2019. And all the information that we've gathered with the FBI tells us that Sikh Americans are definitely a disproportionately targeted group at a rate of more than 4 times the national average. So we know that hate crimes are historically underdocumented, and so this record number of incidences is very concerning to us, because we know that this number is actually a lot higher as well. So to discuss how all these incidences and crimes have been targeted towards the Sikh community, I'd like to start by talking about the very horrific incident that killed 7 members of our community at the Oak Creek, Wisconsin Gurdwara by white supremacists a few years ago. And this has left a really deep wound in our community. Over the last 2 years, we've also seen so many incidences that have affected our community. As I mentioned, these rise of incidences are very concerning because they include bullying of our kids in school and other hate incidences. There was a specific one in Lakewood, Colorado, where a Sikh man, Lakwan Singh, was brutally attacked when a man entered his store and began harassing him and his wife. They shouted profanity, they damaged numerous goods, and they told the couple to go back to their country. And when he finally left the store and Mr. Singh followed him to take a photo of his license, this man struck him with his vehicle and threw him several feet across the parking lot. So this is just one of the examples of how this hate incident happened there. There was another one in New Mexico last year where a Sikh-owned Indian restaurant was vandalized, and there were hate messages scrawled all across its walls, including words like "go home" and other horrible profanity, which I won't even mention here. And that also was very horrifying and caused so much damage. And then last year, another horrific incident was a gunman who launched an attack on the FedEx ground facility in Indianapolis. This facility is widely known for employing a high concentration of Sikh workers, and 8 lives were lost, and 4 of those were members from the Indianapolis Sikh community. Then in September, as Rizwan mentioned, at the Khalsa Gurmat Center, Gurdwara, our house of worship and community center near Seattle, was vandalized and burglarized. And this year, we received another information about a Sikh taxi driver just in January who was attacked and berated by another driver at the John F. Kennedy Airport in Queens. When he was parking his cab at the terminal taxi stand, this other driver blocked his vehicle, and when Mr. Singh picked up his customer and stepped partway out of his car to ask the other driver to move, the other driver hit him with his own car door and beginning repeatedly hitting him in his head, chest, and arms. So there have been just so many incidences to talk about, and these are just some that plague our community. And as I work for SALDEV, these calls actually just keep coming in, unfortunately. Just last week, I spoke to a man in California who said 4 of his neighbors ganged up against him and have been harassing him, destroying his property, taunting him. And, you know, unfortunately, nothing has really gone well with the law enforcement in that area. So we have been putting him in touch with the FBI, which we are so grateful to have partners with, to stop these crimes before they even escalate and find him whatever resources he needs in that area. So there's just so much to be done. As far as how our community has lessened hate crimes and incidences, we've encouraged our community members to especially document all hate incidences, including non-criminal activities such as hate speech, because we really want to help our law enforcement agencies to better understand the full magnitude of the problem. You know, we have a huge issue. We also monitor the media and how the media depicts our Sikh community. And we also contact those key media channels that disseminate misinformation and disinformation, and, you know, try to stop them to putting our community at risk and danger. And since 2015, SALDEV personally has worked very hard to make sure that the FBI tracked anti-Sikh hate crime data. Earlier than that, it wasn't included. So we also wanted to make sure we did that, and we partnered with the Department of Justice and other organizations to develop training materials and advocated for language accessibility and resources and systems to help with hate victims. And finally, I just want to mention, we've also partnered with other agencies like the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, the Department of Homeland Security, and others, and also applied for grants offered by FEMA. And finally, we've actively worked in building bridges across communities in working groups like HACCEN And we really would like to stand in solidarity with other communities that are also targeted and join collectively to unite to fight against hate. We're actually planning a unity march in June in DC with the AAPI community, and I hope many of you will be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Wow, again, tons of information, never enough time. I would love for all of the panelists to come back onto camera, and we're going to start pinging all of you with some great questions. These questions come from you, the people who are attending. These are the things that you said that you were interested in learning today on the webinar. So if there are other questions that occur to you, please do put them in the question box and we'll weave them in as best we can. So this very first question, Lindsay, is going to you first, my friend, and it's kind of a basic one. How do you know that you have been the victim of a hate crime? How do you know that? Lindsay, can you take the first stab at that?
So even though, yes, that might sound easy, but like I said, like we talked about before, it can be one word that can make a difference between the First Amendment freedom of speech or a hate crime. So with that being said, how do you know if you have had any violence towards you, if you feel that you were threatened because of one of those characteristics that I talked about earlier? If a reasonable person believes that they are in danger or that bodily harm can be done to them, then there is a good possibility that you have been a victim of a hate crime. Now, again, like I said, and Rizwan and Vicky and Sharon have talked about, like I said, very disgusting, hurtful things, right? And we understand that, and we understand even those, and I'm not downplaying or saying that they're any less hurtful or harmful, but even those, we still want you to let us know about. So that's why I'm saying, regardless if there was a threatening in nature, you still need to reach out to us. Reach out to your law enforcement partners if it's an immediate danger, imminent threat, and then still please reach out to us. So again, it's not your decision to have to make if you have been a victim of a hate crime. But if you believe, if you're threatened, if you feel threatened, if anyone has done anything to you of violence, and again, based on your race, religion, sexual orientation, any of those characteristics, then you need to report it to the police and to the FBI.
And Vicky, I think perhaps you might have had some things that you wanted to add on to that as well in terms of how do you know if you have experienced a hate?
Just two things, or a couple things. First of all, adding on to what Lindsay just said, I think even if it's just an incident and doesn't rise to a crime, it is important to be aware and report. Because you know, those get tracked. I think Rizwan commented on it. Bullying can become harassment, can become an assault, and so it is important to report those things. I also think it's important to notice that sometimes the hate is not obvious. I know there are lots of stereotypes, Jewish stereotypes, that things can be said without being explicit. And as a member of the Jewish community, you recognize it as targeting you, even if the word Jewish wasn't used. You know, Rizwan commented on the abuse faced by Sikhs because people believe that Sikhs are Arabs or Muslims. So it doesn't always have to be explicit. It doesn't always have to be an actual specific word, but references are also can be more subtle than that and just as hurtful.
So you both have talked about now the need to report, and Lindsay, you've said report to your local law enforcement if you're in danger. Vicky, you've talked also about reporting. I want to flip these questions first over to Rizwan and then Sharon to say, where do you recommend that members in your community actually report? Where do you go? Who do you tell if something like this happens to you? Rizwan, what say you, sir?
Yep. No, thank you. Great points and great discussion. As far as reporting goes, obviously it's very important, even if it's just a hate intimidation or if it's hate crime, to report it to someone, you know, and in multiple channels is what we suggest. Make sure that your house of worship, you know, let your imam, pastor, rabbi, clergy, you know, let them know, let your house of worship know. If it's an emergency, first, obviously, call 911, right? So emergency, always call 911. Then after that, report to your house of worship, call the FBI, 202 278 2000. And we always do that. We email the community whenever there's heightened alerts. There's non-emergency numbers for your local law enforcement. Make sure that if it's let's say a hate speech, not an emergency, call the non-emergency number, report it online through one of the law enforcement portals as well, but do it multi-channel. Local law enforcement, let the FBI know, let your house of worship know, let the regional and national civil rights organizations know as well, so that you're covering all your grounds, and make sure that it gets reported up and down the chain, and so it can be tracked and responded to. And it's one of those things, again, we appreciate our partners in law enforcement. They, as Lindsay mentioned and Amy's mentioned, just, even if it's a hate speech, just so that they're aware. We've done that many times where, let's say someone emailed us and said, we're going to burn the Quran at your mosque. So we communicated right away to local law enforcement and FBI. Eventually that person did not end up coming, but you got to do that report right away.
Thank you. What a great comprehensive summary of kind of where to go with the report. Sharon, what's your experience been with?
Yeah, I mean, Rizwan's covered a lot. And I think the only other thing I want to mention is something Lindsay mentioned, is if you want to remain anonymous, report to with the tip line, because at least then you can keep anonymous if you're not comfortable. The other thing which CELDEF is doing, actually, we're working on with TAF to create a comprehensive packet that provides specific hate crimes reporting processes for each state in the US. We're going to make this available later this spring. And this packet is not intended for emergency purposes at all, but it serves as a resource for our community. So we want to make that available, and that's something we're working on. But again, as I just want to echo what Rizwan says, when you see something, just report it. I know my son came back from school one day and said, Mom, somebody on the bus was talking about bringing a gun to school. Right away, I was on the phone with the school, calling the school, officers saying, have you heard about this? Have you heard about the fact that kids are talking about this on the bus? You need to make sure you keep these kids safe. And they said, definitely, we've heard about it. We know who the kid is. They arrested the kid right away the next day. And they also, put a lot of police enforcements into the school. But I think it's all about what you hear from your children, what you hear from, anybody around you, just report it.
Aside from reporting, there's certainly value in talking about hate crimes and hate incidents with other communities. So Sharon, I'm going to swing back to you for a follow-up on this. How do you engage, or where do you talk to other people, not just to report a hate crime, but about hate crimes more generally, what you can do more generally about hate crimes? Where do you have those conversations?
Yeah, so I mean, forums like this is one of them for sure, right? Today we are here very honored to be here actually to do this and to talk about this. I also really think, in addition to regular news media and social media and everything else that we are all, aware of, where we can gather information and we can share information, I also highly recommend that we join faith-based information sharing and analysis organizations like the one Maya is running, to share information and access all the library of tactics, techniques, procedures, resources, work with other faith-based organizations, because everybody is doing so much. And, everybody has different resources that we can learn from and not have to reinvent the wheel. And finally, I would say, we need to keep abreast of rising threats in our local areas, and also contact local organizations and different agencies like the Department of Justice, Community Relations. You volunteer to get onto advisory councils such as the FBI, which I'm thankfully happy to be able to do that, and work on groups like HACCEN, because honestly, this is the way in which we can continue to do these information sharing processes and be able to help one another.
Well said. We're going to keep rolling along. We have a lot of questions to get to still. So this next one, Rizwan, I'm going to send your way first. Some of our folks asked, what can leaders of houses of worship do to protect their own house of worship from a hate crime or a hate incident? What can the leaders do?
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the question, and definitely very important. And, we covered a few of those items as far as, security assessments, right? You can work with your local law enforcement. They offer sometimes security assessments, obviously Department of Justice, FBI, field offices, and DHS. And so we've done joint activities with them. We've done segmented activities of assessments of training as well. You know, Department of Justice Community Relations Service, DOJ CRS, they can help coordinate throughout the regions as well with the various agencies to come up with tailored security training as well. So there's a lot of resources on the training side, and obviously, even Secure Communities Network and others have excellent training that is out there. So training, obviously, once you do the assessment, you want to make sure you have security cameras, outside as well as indoors, and make sure that vulnerable spots are covered, as well as making sure that you have strengthened door buzzers depending on the house of worship as well. Security guards, armed, unarmed, especially for school, school scenarios and group areas as well. So definitely a lot of defense in depth is very important. It's unfortunate that we have to think about this between houses of worship, but it is something to think about. The other thing, for individuals, we're part of scouting, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. We always say buddy system. Always try to make sure you're, together with someone so that you're not alone, especially in different areas, remote areas, parks, etc. Make sure you have a buddy system as well. And so, and whistles, and then self-defense. Take self-defense classes, and pepper spray, etc. To make sure that, depending on the vulnerability situation, to look at different options. Thank you.
That was a lot of great ideas. Vicki, I'm going to toss to you to see if you want to add to all of those things that Rizwan just talked about.
Sorry about that, I was muted. That was really very comprehensive. I think what I would add is just that it's always ongoing. Never, it's not that you've gone to a training and you're done. There are always new members of your community. There's always updating, reminding yourself of the training that you had a few years ago. It's just an ongoing process. The other thing I would add is sort of piggybacking on Rizwan's idea of the buddy system. I think that's, I think of a buddy system as at the individual level. I would say at the institutional level, it applies as well. Most of our synagogues, mosques, churches, temples sit in communities. Be a part of the community. Be a part of the community. Get to know the other houses of worship in the neighborhood. Look out for each other.
And if I can,
go ahead, Rizwan. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to add just one more thing is, keep your phone handy, your camera handy, record, if there's, let's say, a vehicle or what have you, so that you get the license plate, or you can try to record the incident, etc. So just wanted to add that one last thing that is important for personal safety.
And actually, if I can add on also, I would say for the leaders of houses of worship, empower your congregants, empower the kids in your community. I think you can't be everywhere. I know Sharon talked about her son on the bus overhearing something. My son was in a class and overheard, had a teacher say something that was concerning, and in terms of spreading information that was inaccurate and could potentially lead to biases and hate. And he reached out to the teacher very politely, but used his voice to explain what was problematic about what was said. I think that is a really important tool that we need to use as well.
We sadly are already getting close to the end of our time together. It goes so quickly. But I do want to hit on one more major topic, and that's if some hate incident or hate crime actually happens, and you are, or someone who is the victim of a hate crime. Lindsay, I'm going to toss this over to you first to talk about federal resources. What's out there in terms of resources to help victims of hate crimes? Lindsay, over to you.
Yeah. Hi, yes, thanks. So within the FBI, we have a victim specialist, and this is, I would say, the liaison between the agent that's investigating and then the incident. So when the victim comes to the FBI, we will have them meet with the victim specialist. They provide many, many services: medical, social services, counseling, reasonable protection, status of the investigation. As we know with everything, some things we can, some things we can't share. However, this victim specialist would be your point of contact if you had any questions regarding that. And obviously, if there's any coordination, like I said, with any of those services, medical, treatment, counseling, you would be able to go to this individual. And I personally worked with victim specialists with the FBI, and they've been great. Obviously, that's what they're here to do. Very focused and know how to work appropriately and sensitively with potential victim of a hate crime.
Thanks for that, Lindsay. And I also wanted to give the other panelists a chance to weigh on that topic as well. Anyone else want to add to what do you recommend as resources for those who have been victims?
I'll go ahead and add on. I mean, obviously, Lindsay covered a very important part. I think, again, counseling is important to make sure that there's some pastoral counseling for the victims from the house of worship. And so, it is something that when we've had victims of bullying in schools and assaults, we've tried to make sure that there's counseling available to them, advocacy, advocates for them as well to make sure that they get the help and interface with law enforcement as well. And so that's an important part where sometimes the victims are, not able to navigate some of the, reporting, et cetera, to help provide them that aspect. And then again, solidarity, right? That's the other part. We talk about the multi-faith solidarity. If a victim, if it's a synagogue, church, mosque, temple that gets attacked, that we come together. If it's virtually or in person, we stand shoulder to shoulder, to respond so that the perpetrators and people know that again, when one is attacked, that we are all attacked, but we will respond to this bad and this evil with love and peace.
Love and peace the world needs more of all the time, right? Our time together has flown by, and I'm so sad, but so excited too to be able to speak with all of you today. And I want to give each of you the chance to give just one final little tidbit that's something that our attendees can take with them as they go through the day. We're going to go in reverse order of how all of you spoke. So Sharon, I'm going to pitch it over to you first for what's the one thing that you'd like attendees to remember from today, Sharon?
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy, and thank you for having me on this panel today and representing the Sikh community. I think we are all here today because we need to secure a future, and we need to stand for peace and fight against all these hateful beliefs before any vulnerable community members encounter them. We also need to really encourage our kids to notice the injustices around them and speak out on behalf of oppressed people. We need to denounce any rhetoric that promotes hate or hateful speech or ideology that is infiltrating our society and communities. And finally, we need to play a role to step up and push back against any small instances of hateful speech before it even has a chance to radicalize more people. We individually need to all be mobilizing in our communities, and we must also acknowledge that this problem of hate is really too big for any one of us to handle. But we need to rally entire societies to fight against it, against violent extremism, ideology, and prejudices. We also need to work with government, and we are so grateful for all our partnerships at all levels on not only passing strong anti-hate policies, but setting powerful norms of civility and respect for one another. And the final thing is to fight against hate is actually a fight of our time. So we want this world to be better. We need to all commit and move our nation to become a nation where we all find and become the lights of beacon of hope. Let's not stop till we win this fight.
Beautifully and eloquently put. Thank you, Sharon. Rizwan, I'm going to flip it over to you now. What would you like the audience to take away from it?
No, thank you. I know definitely well, put by Sister Sharon, and again, thank you to colleagues Vicky, Sharon, Lindsay, Amy, and Maya, and Andy, and everyone. Appreciate the teamwork, and I think solidarity, right? Solidarity, allyship, partnerships, again, between our government, between faith communities, between our community. That's what it's all about, right? Partnerships, sharing information, and collaborating for safety and security, and also not being in despair either, right? We are always hopeful. We're always optimistic. So, we know there are challenges, and we will respond to them together. And we have to remain vigilant and make sure that we're doing our part in that aspect, and coming together to respond whenever there is a challenge, through education, proactively to the masses as much as possible, and making sure that we're reaching out to people that even have different perspectives as well, so that we're working to make the world a better place. God reminds us in the Quran that God has created us as nations and tribes so that we may get to know one another. Let's get to know one another. And then also God reminds us we must be upholders of justice and witness to truth. And so let us work towards those goals. Thank you.
Beautifully said, Rizwan. Thank you for that. Vicki, tossing it over to you. What's the thing that you would like attendees to take away from today's conversation?
Thank you again. It's really an honor to be part of this team. And Sharon and Rizwan, you summed it up so beautifully. I'm struggling not to repeat what you've said, but I would say I think that the main thing I would say is we need to be preparing for the worst, and we need to be building for the best. So there are two components to this. You know, we do need to worry about security. We need to worry about facility hardening measures and things like that. And then we need to be doing the other work of building community solidarity and justice.
The attorney is the most succinct. That's impressive for today. Lindsay, my friend, over to you. What's the thing that you would like folks to take away from today?
Just like everyone has said, so thankful for everyone on the team and everyone here today, because obviously we're all on the same page that we know how important this is and how crucial it is. I just want to say it would be awesome to have everyone just be accepting and respectful of everyone. And if we can just kind of push that energy, that would be amazing. And just coordination. We need to work together on this and report. That's how we can help you. And everyone deserves the right to be safe and protected and to be proud of who they are without any fear or violence or intimidation. And that's really the path that we need to continue on. But thank you so much, everybody. A blessing to be a part of this.
Maya, back to you for final comments.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you to everyone who participated today. And thank you all for joining us. I hope that by way of this presentation, we have inspired you to join us on HACCEN. We won't have all the answers on how to combat hate crimes, but by talking about hate crimes, then perhaps we can find a way to bring down the level of incidents and to support one another as we navigate through these incidents that affect us in so many ways. I also hope that you will join us for our next webinar, which will tackle the topic of race and hate crimes. As you know, 2020 saw a dramatic rise in hate crimes against many different races and ethnicities. So please join us for a discussion about the role of hate crimes as linked to the victim's race. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.